How did someone fail miserably at trying to outsmart you? My ex-partner tried pushing me out of our tech startup after 3 years building it together. He began excluding me from investor meetings and making unilateral decisions about our product roadmap. I first noticed when our lead developer mentioned a new direction I knew nothing about. Rather than confronting him directly, I quietly started documenting everything while pretending to be oblivious. He grew increasingly bold, accidentally leaving me off important client emails and scheduling demos when I had conflicts. Meanwhile, I meticulously backed up our entire codebase and archived all communications, including my original prototypes from before he joined. The final straw came when I discovered he'd scheduled a board meeting to vote me out during my supposed vacation. What he didn't realize, I never left town. I was meeting with my attorney and gathering evidence. During his presentation about my lack of contribution, I walked in with my lawyer and a forensic accounting report showing he'd been diverting company funds to his personal side project. His face turned ghost white. Meeting adjourned, our lead investor announced coldly. 2 weeks later, he was removed as CEO. The board offered me his position, which I accepted with one condition: pursue legal action for his embezzlement. At his sentencing, he muttered, "You could have just confronted me." I smiled and replied, "I did. You just weren't smart enough to notice until it was too late." But let me back up and tell you how we got here, because this story isn't just about corporate betrayal. It's about how someone I trusted like a brother slowly revealed himself to be a snake, and how sometimes the best revenge is simply letting someone hang themselves with their own rope. My name's Alex Chen, and 3 years ago I was just another broke computer science graduate with a big idea and zero business experience. I'd been working nights at a 24-hour diner, coding during my breaks, surviving on coffee and pure stubborn determination. The idea that would become our startup, Cloudflow, came to me during one of those 3 a.m. coding sessions when I was half delirious from exhaustion. See, I'd been frustrated with how complicated it was for small businesses to manage their data workflows. Everything required expensive enterprise software or technical expertise most small business owners didn't have. I wanted to create something elegant, intuitive, powerful, but accessible. Something that could democratize data management for the little guys. I spent 6 months building the initial prototype in my cramped studio apartment. My neighbors probably thought I'd lost my mind. I'd be coding until sunrise, then crash for a few hours before my diner shift. But I could see the potential. This wasn't just another app. This could change how millions of small businesses operated. The problem was, I knew nothing about running a business. I could build the product, but I needed someone who understood investors, marketing, sales, all the stuff they don't teach you in computer science classes. That's where Marcus came in. I met Marcus Rodriguez at a tech meetup in downtown Portland. He was giving a talk about scaling startups in the Pacific Northwest, and honestly, he was magnetic. Tall, confident, with this easy charm that made everyone in the room lean forward when he spoke. He had an MBA from Wharton, had worked at 2 successful startups, and he carried himself like he belonged in boardrooms with venture capitalists. After his talk, I approached him with my laptop and showed him my prototype. His eyes lit up as I walked him through the features, explained the market opportunity, demonstrated how it could solve real problems for real businesses. "This is incredible," he said, running his hand through his perfectly styled hair. "You built this alone." I nodded, feeling a flush of pride. "It's just the MVP, but I think there's something here." "Something here." He laughed. "Alex, this could be huge. I mean, enterprise-level functionality with consumer-grade simplicity. The total addressable market has to be in the billions." That's when he made the offer that would change everything. "Look, I know you probably get this a lot, but I'd love to partner with you on this. You handle the product side, you're clearly brilliant at that, and I'll handle everything else. Business development, fundraising, operations, the whole 9 yards. What do you say we build something amazing together?" I should have been more careful. I should have done background checks, asked for references, insisted on legal documentation before we moved forward. But I was 24, broke, and desperate to turn my idea into reality. Marcus seemed like the answer to all my problems. We shook hands that night, and within a week, we'd filed the paperwork to incorporate Cloudflow technologies. 50-50 split, co-founders and co-CEOs. Marcus insisted on the dual CEO structure, said it showed investors we were equals, that the company had both technical and business leadership from day one. The first year was incredible. Marcus proved he knew what he was talking about when it came to business development. He secured our first office space, landed our initial angel funding, and brought on our first employees. Meanwhile, I focused on product development, building out the engineering team, turning my rough prototype into a polished, scalable platform. We complemented each other perfectly, or at least, that's what I thought. Marcus had this way of making everyone feel like they were part of something special. He'd walk into the office with expensive coffee for the whole team, remember everyone's birthdays, ask about their families. He was the face of the company at industry events, the one who charmed potential clients and investors. People loved him, and I was fine with that. I preferred being in the background anyway, solving technical problems, working with our developers, making sure our product was rock solid. Marcus handled the schmoozing, I handled the building. It seemed like the perfect partnership. Our first major breakthrough came 8 months after we launched. A mid-sized retail chain in Seattle agreed to pilot our platform. Marcus had been courting them for months, and when they finally signed on, it validated everything we'd been working toward. The pilot was a massive success. We helped them streamline their inventory management, reduce costs by 23%, and integrate systems that had never talked to each other before. Word spread fast in the tight-knit Seattle business community. Suddenly, we had a waitlist of companies wanting to try Cloudflow. Marcus was fielding calls from potential clients daily, and I was working around the clock to scale our infrastructure to handle the demand. That's when the venture capital firms started calling. Marcus handled all the initial investor outreach. He'd come back from meetings with updates. This firm was interested. That one wanted to see more traction. Another one loved our vision, but thought it was too early. I trusted him completely. Why wouldn't I? We were partners. The first red flag I missed was subtle. During one of our weekly check-ins, Marcus mentioned that Cascade Ventures, a prominent Seattle VC firm, wanted to schedule a follow-up meeting. They're really excited about Cloudflow, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. They think we could be looking at a Series A in the next 6 months. That's amazing, I replied. When's the meeting? I should probably prepare a technical deep dive presentation. Actually, Marcus said quickly. They specifically requested that I handle this one solo. They want to focus on market strategy and business development first. You know how it is. Sometimes too much technical detail can overwhelm investors in early conversations. I was disappointed but figured he knew better than I did about investor relations. Okay, just make sure to emphasize our technical advantages. The proprietary algorithms are really what set us apart from competitors. Of course, he said with that trademark smile. Don't worry, I've got this. I should have insisted on being included. I should have questioned why investors wouldn't want to meet the technical co-founder. But I was naive, and I trusted Marcus. That trust would cost me dearly. The second red flag came a month later. Sarah, our lead developer, stopped by my desk with a confused expression. Hey Alex, Marcus was asking me about the feasibility of adding real-time analytics to the dashboard. He mentioned it was a high priority for Q3. I thought that wasn't on our roadmap until next year. I frowned. We'd specifically decided during our last product planning session that real-time analytics were too resource-intensive for our current development cycle. That's odd. Let me check with Marcus about the priorities. When I brought it up with Marcus later, he brushed it off casually. Oh, that was just exploratory. You know how it is. Investors always ask about advanced features. I wanted to understand what was possible. But Sarah said you called it a Q3 priority. I think there was a miscommunication, he said, not missing a beat. You know how developers can sometimes interpret casual questions as firm requirements. Again, I let it slide. But a pattern was starting to emerge, and subconsciously, I was beginning to notice. The third incident was harder to dismiss. I was working late one Thursday evening when I decided to check my email before heading home. In my inbox was a message from one of our potential clients, Dataflow Solutions, thanking Marcus for the comprehensive demo earlier that day. I stared at the email, confused. I hadn't given any demos that day, and Marcus hadn't mentioned meeting with Dataflow. In fact, I thought we'd agreed that all client demos required both co-founders present, especially for larger prospects. I forwarded the email to Marcus with a simple question, demo with Dataflow today. I wasn't aware we had this scheduled. His response came back within minutes. Sorry, should have mentioned it. They reached out last minute for a quick capabilities overview. Didn't want to pull you away from the server migration project. We'll brief you tomorrow. But tomorrow came and went without any briefing. When I brought it up, Marcus seemed genuinely surprised that he'd forgotten to update me. Oh right, Dataflow. Honestly, it wasn't that significant. They're still in early exploration phase. I didn't want to distract you from technical work for what was essentially an introductory conversation. I was starting to feel like I was being managed rather than partnered with. But Marcus was so smooth, so convincing, that I found myself questioning my own concerns. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe this was just how business development worked. The pattern continued over the next several weeks. Client emails that didn't include me. Product decisions made without my input. Investor meetings I wasn't invited to. Each incident had a plausible explanation, but together they painted a picture I was reluctant to acknowledge. The turning point came during what should have been a celebration. We'd just closed our Series A funding, $3.2 million from Cascade Ventures and 2 other firms. It was everything we'd worked toward. Validation of our vision and potential. Marcus organized a team celebration at an upscale restaurant in downtown Portland. The whole company was there. All 12 employees, their significant others, even some of our early angel investors. Marcus gave a speech thanking everyone for their hard work, talking about our vision for the future, our plans for scaling the team. I should have been euphoric. Instead, I felt strangely disconnected from the whole thing. Throughout Marcus's speech, I noticed how he referred to my vision for the company and the product I've been building. Not our vision, not the product we'd built together. After dinner, as people were starting to head home, I pulled Marcus aside. "Great speech," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "Though I noticed you seemed to take credit for some things we built together." Marcus looked genuinely surprised. "What do you mean?" "Well, you talked about your vision for democratizing data management. That was actually the core concept I brought to you at the tech meetup." "Of course," he said quickly. "I didn't mean to imply otherwise. You know how it is with these speeches, you get caught up in the moment, use the wrong pronouns. Everyone knows this started with your technical brilliance." But something in his tone felt off, like he was placating me rather than acknowledging a legitimate concern. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying moments from the past year, seeing them in a new light. The excluded meetings, the unilateral decisions, the way Marcus positioned himself as the primary face of the company while I stayed in the background, building. At 3 a.m., I made a decision that would ultimately save my company and my future. I started documenting everything. I began keeping detailed records of every conversation, every email, every decision. I started paying closer attention to what Marcus was doing and saying, but I was careful not to change my behavior. I didn't want him to know I was watching. The documentation revealed a disturbing pattern. Over the past 6 months, Marcus had been systematically excluding me from key business decisions while maintaining the illusion of partnership. He'd been positioning himself to investors and clients as the primary founder, the visionary behind Cloudflow. But I needed more than just my observations. I needed evidence. That's when I started what I privately called Operation Paper Trail. I began meticulously backing up every file, every email, every piece of code. I created secure encrypted backups of our entire code base, including all the version history that showed my original contributions. I archived communications, investor presentations, financial records, everything that might become relevant later. I also started being more strategic about creating documentation in real time. When Marcus made decisions without consulting me, I'd send follow-up emails confirming my understanding of what had been decided. When I was excluded from meetings, I'd email asking for updates. I was creating a paper trail that would show the pattern of exclusion. The most damning evidence came from an unexpected source: our company's Slack channels. One evening, while working on a particularly complex algorithm, I realized I needed to check something in our business development Slack channel. Marcus had added me to it months earlier, but had been using it primarily for coordinating with our sales team. What I found there made my blood run cold. There were dozens of conversations between Marcus and our business development hire, Jake, discussing strategy for transitioning the company away from technical co-founder model. Messages about how investors prefer clear leadership hierarchy, and how Alex is brilliant but not CEO material. The worst was a message from Marcus to Jake from 3 weeks earlier. "Spoke with Cascade today. They're on board with the leadership transition. Alex will stay on as CTO, obviously, but we need to start positioning Cloudflow as having singular executive leadership. Market responds better to clear authority structure." I screenshot everything, my hands shaking with rage and disbelief. This wasn't just exclusion, this was a systematic plan to push me out of the leadership role in the company I'd created. But the Slack messages revealed something even worse. There were references to something called Project Streamline, a side project Marcus had been working on using Cloudflow resources and personnel. Digging deeper, I discovered that Marcus had been using our company credit card to pay contractors for work on his personal project. He'd been having our developers work on Streamline during company time, billing it as research and development for Cloudflow. He was essentially using our startup as his personal development agency. The financial implications were staggering. Over 6 months, Marcus had diverted nearly $80,000 in company resources to his side project. Money that came from our investors, money that was supposed to be used to grow Cloudflow. This wasn't just betrayal, it was embezzlement. I knew I needed legal advice, but I also knew I had to be careful. If Marcus suspected I was on to him, he might accelerate whatever timeline he had for pushing me out. I reached out to Amanda Walsh, an attorney who specialized in startup law and founder disputes. I'd met her at a legal clinic for entrepreneurs a year earlier. She agreed to meet with me confidentially to review what I'd discovered. Amanda's office was in a converted warehouse in Portland's Pearl District. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 30s, but she had a reputation for being ruthless when it came to protecting her clients' interests. I laid out everything I'd discovered: the systematic exclusion, the embezzlement, the plan to transition me out of leadership. Amanda listened without interruption, occasionally taking notes on a legal pad. "This is serious," she said when I finished. "The financial diversion alone could constitute embezzlement, depending on how your partnership agreement is structured. But the systematic exclusion from business decisions could violate your rights as a co-founder. What are my options?" Well, the nuclear option would be to confront him directly with evidence and demand he cease all problematic behavior. But given the pattern you've described, I suspect he'd just become more careful about hiding his actions. What's the alternative? Amanda smiled, and for the first time since discovering Marcus's betrayal, I felt a spark of hope. "We let him think he's winning while we build an airtight case. Continue documenting everything, let him make his moves. And when the time is right, we present everything to your board and investors at once. Won't that damage the company? Short term maybe. But if Marcus is embezzling funds and planning to push out the technical founder, the company is already damaged. We're just making sure the right person ends up in control when the dust settles." I hired Amanda that day, and began phase 2 of my documentation strategy. Instead of just passively recording Marcus's actions, I started creating situations that would force him to reveal his true intentions. For example, I began seasicking myself on important emails using a personal account, claiming I wanted to stay looped in while traveling. I started asking pointed questions about financial decisions, forcing Marcus to explain expenses on the record. I volunteered to take on more business development responsibilities, which made him defensive about stepping on each other's toes. Each interaction provided more evidence of his pattern of exclusion and deception. The breakthrough came 6 weeks later. I'd been working late on a particularly challenging feature when I overheard Marcus on a phone call in his office. Our offices were separated by a thin wall, and when he got animated, his voice carried. No, the timeline is still on track," he was saying. "Alex won't be a problem. He's completely focused on the technical side, doesn't pay attention to business decision." There was a pause, then "The board meeting is scheduled for the 15th. I've already confirmed that Alex will be out of town for his sister's wedding. By the time he gets back, the transition will be complete." My sister's wedding was in 2 weeks, in San Diego. Marcus was planning to use my absence to have me voted out of leadership. I immediately texted Amanda the details. Her response was swift: "Perfect. Let him think you're going to the wedding. We'll be ready." The next morning I told Marcus I was looking forward to my sister's wedding, complained about having to take time away from work during such a crucial period for the company. He was sympathetic, assured me that everything would be fine while I was gone. "Don't worry about work stuff," he said with what I now recognized as his manipulative smile. "Just focus on family. Cloudflow will still be here when you get back." The irony wasn't lost on me. Instead of going to San Diego, I spent that week with Amanda, preparing for war. We organized all the evidence into a comprehensive presentation: financial records showing the embezzlement, Slack messages revealing the conspiracy to push me out, email chains demonstrating systematic exclusion from business decisions, screenshots of code repositories proving my foundational contributions to the product. We also brought in a forensic accountant to analyze Cloudflow's financial records. What she discovered was even worse than I'd suspected. Marcus hadn't just diverted $80,000 to his side project, he'd been paying himself an unauthorized salary increase, expensing personal purchases, and using company funds for a wide range of questionable expenses. The total came to nearly $150,000 in misappropriated funds. Amanda also reached out to our lead investor at Cascade Ventures. Patricia Kim had led our Series A round and held a board seat. Without revealing the specific details, Amanda asked if Patricia would be available for an urgent board meeting regarding serious governance and financial irregularities. Patricia agreed to attend, along with our other board members. The morning of Marcus's planned coup, I woke up before dawn. I was nervous but also excited. After months of documenting his betrayal, I was finally going to confront him with the truth. I arrived at our office building early and waited in the parking garage. I wanted to see Marcus arrive, wanted to watch him walk into what he thought would be his triumphant moment. He pulled up at exactly 9:45 a.m. in his BMW, a car he'd bought using company funds. I now knew. He was wearing his best suit, the one he saved for important investor meetings. He looked confident, almost cocky as he walked toward the building. The board meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. in our main conference room. Marcus had told the team that it was a routine quarterly review, that they should continue working normally. Only the board members and senior leadership were invited. At 9:55 I texted Amanda, "Showtime." I took the elevator to our floor, and walked quietly toward the conference room. Through the glass walls, I could see Marcus at the head of the table, laptop open, presentation ready. Patricia and our other board members were settling into their seats. Marcus began his presentation at exactly 10 a.m. I couldn't hear everything, but I could see him clicking through slides, gesturing confidently, making his case for why Cloudflow needed streamlined leadership, and why the technical co-founder role should be restructured. At 10:15, Amanda and I walked into the conference room. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Marcus's face went from confident to confused to pale in the span of about 3 seconds. "Alex," he stammered, "I thought you were at your sister's wedding." "I was never going to my sister's wedding," I said calmly, taking a seat at the table. "There is no wedding. I've been in town all week working with my attorney to investigate some concerning irregularities in our company's financial and governance practices." Amanda placed a thick folder on the table. "Good morning, everyone. I'm Amanda Walsh, representing Alex Chen. We have some serious matters to discuss regarding Mr. Rodriguez's conduct as co-CEO. Patricia looked confused. "I'm sorry, but what's going on here?" "Marcus, you said this meeting was to discuss operational restructuring." "It was," Marcus said, trying to regain his composure. "This is just a misunderstanding." "Alex, I don't know what you think you've discovered, but I've discovered that you've been systematically embezzling company funds," I said, cutting him off. "I've discovered that you've been planning to push me out of leadership while I was supposed to be at a family event. I've discovered that you've been using Cloudflow resources to develop your own competing product." The room went dead silent. Amanda opened her folder and began distributing copies of our evidence package to each board member. "What you'll find in these materials is comprehensive documentation of financial irregularities, breach of fiduciary duty, and potential embezzlement totaling approximately $150,000. Marcus's face had gone from pale to ghost white. "This is ridiculous. Alex, you're clearly upset about being excluded from some business decisions, but this is Marcus." Patricia's voice was ice cold. "I suggest you stop talking and let us review these materials." For the next 30 minutes, the room was silent except for the rustle of papers as the board members reviewed the evidence. I watched Marcus's face as the reality of his situation sank in. He looked like a man watching his life fall apart in real time. Finally, Patricia looked up. "Mr. Rodriguez, these allegations are extremely serious. The financial documentation alone appears to show clear misappropriation of company funds. The communications suggesting a plan to remove your co-founder without board approval represent a serious breach of your fiduciary duties." "I can explain everything," Marcus said desperately. "The financial issues are just accounting errors. The Project Streamline work was all research and development for Cloudflow, and the leadership discussion was just exploratory." "Marcus," I said quietly, "stop lying. We have forensic accounting records. We have Slack messages where you explicitly discuss using our contractors for your personal project. We have recordings of phone calls where you discuss removing me from leadership. It's over." Amanda leaned forward. "Mr. Rodriguez, given the severity of these allegations, I strongly recommend you consult with your own attorney before making any further statements." Patricia closed her copy of the evidence package. "This meeting is adjourned. Marcus, you are suspended from all duties as co-CEO effective immediately, pending a full investigation. Alex, can you ensure continuity of operations while we sort this out?" "Of course," I said. "I'll make sure our team knows that business continues as usual." 2 weeks later, after a thorough investigation by an independent firm, the board voted unanimously to remove Marcus as co-CEO and terminate his employment for cause. They offered me his position, which I accepted with one condition: that we pursue full legal action for the embezzled funds. The criminal case took 8 months to work through the system. Marcus hired expensive attorneys, claimed everything was a misunderstanding, tried to argue that the fund diversions were authorized business expenses, but the evidence was overwhelming. He ultimately pled guilty to embezzlement and fraud charges in exchange for a reduced sentence. At his sentencing hearing, as the judge was explaining his 18-month prison term and restitution requirements, he looked across the courtroom at me. "You could have just confronted me," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I stood up and walked over to where he was sitting with his lawyers. "I did confront you, Marcus," I said calmly. "Every time I asked about meetings I wasn't invited to. Every time I questioned decisions made without my input. Every time I tried to understand why my own company felt like it was moving away from me. You just weren't smart enough to notice until it was too late." The bailiff started to intervene, but Marcus held up his hand. "I underestimated you," he said quietly. "I thought you were just the tech guy. I didn't realize you were paying attention to everything else." "That was your first mistake," I replied. "Your second was thinking that betraying someone who trusted you was a sustainable business strategy." As they led him away, I felt a complex mix of emotions: relief that it was finally over, sadness for the partnership that could have been, and a hard-earned wisdom about trust, betrayal, and the importance of staying vigilant even with people you consider friends. Cloudflow survived the scandal, and actually came out stronger. Our investors were impressed with how I'd handled the situation, my thorough documentation, my strategic patience, my ability to protect the company's interests while building a case against Marcus. Several investors mentioned that seeing how I dealt with crisis gave them more confidence in my leadership abilities. We hired a new VP of Business Development, someone with impeccable references and a track record of ethical behavior. I implemented new financial controls and governance structures to prevent future abuse. Most importantly, I learned to trust my instincts when something felt wrong, rather than dismissing concerns as paranoia. The company has grown tremendously since then. We're now at 47 employees, have expanded to 3 cities, and are preparing for our Series B funding round. The product Marcus tried to steal credit for now serves over 10,000 businesses across North America. But the most satisfying part isn't the business success, it's the knowledge that I protected something I built from someone who tried to steal it. That I was patient enough to build an airtight case, rather than acting on emotion. That I was smart enough to document everything, and strategic enough to let my opponent defeat himself. Marcus got out of prison 6 months ago. I heard through mutual contacts that he's working at a mid-level marketing job in Phoenix, still paying restitution for the money he stole. Meanwhile, Cloudflow was just featured on the cover of Tech Entrepreneur magazine as one of the top 50 companies to watch. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Marcus had just been honest with me from the beginning. If he'd communicated his concerns about our partnership structure, if he'd asked for a different role division, if he'd been transparent about his ambitions and goals, we might have found a way to work together that satisfied both of us. But then I remember the systematic nature of his deception, the months of careful planning to push me out, the embezzlement, the lies, and I realized that this wasn't about communication or partnership structures. This was about someone who saw an opportunity to steal credit and profit from work he didn't do, and who was willing to betray a friend to get it. The tech world is full of stories about founder disputes, about partnerships that fall apart, about startups that implode because of internal conflicts. What makes my story different is that I didn't let the betrayal destroy what I'd built. I was patient, I was strategic, I documented everything, and when the moment came to act, I was ready. Looking back, I think Marcus's biggest mistake wasn't the embezzlement or even the attempted coup. It was underestimating me. He saw someone who preferred coding to networking, who was more comfortable with algorithms than investor pitches, who seemed content to stay in the background while he took the spotlight. What he failed to understand is that the same attention to detail that made me a good programmer also made me good at recognizing patterns in human behavior. The same persistence that helped me debug complex code also helped me systematically document months of evidence. The same logical thinking that made me good at solving technical problems also made me good at building a legal case. He thought I was just the tech guy. He didn't realize that being technical doesn't mean being naive, and being introverted doesn't mean being unaware. Marcus tried to outsmart me by being duplicitous and manipulative, but I outsmarted him by being patient and thorough. He played a short-term game focused on immediate advantage. I played a long-term game focused on ultimate justice. In the end, the person who tried to steal my company ended up in prison, while I ended up running a successful business that's helping thousands of companies manage their data more effectively. The product I envisioned during those late-night coding sessions in my cramped apartment is now making a real difference in the world.
And every time someone asks me about founder disputes or startup partnerships, I tell them the same thing: document everything, trust but verify, and never underestimate the power of patience when dealing with betrayal. Because sometimes the best way to outsmart someone who's trying to outsmart you is simply to let them reveal their true nature while you quietly build an unshakable case against them. The truth has a way of winning in the end, especially when you're smart enough to document it along the way.